As South Africa braces for another 10 days of load shedding, power utility Eskom has blamed the outages on sabotage that it says was affected by workers objecting to a wage freeze by the utility. This is how long Eskom says the system is going to take to recover following last week's rolling blackouts. Unions have, on their part, issued a strong denial, saying workers are once again being blamed for management failures. Well, we are joined now in the studio by the National Union of Mineworkers chief negotiator at those wage discussions. That's, of course, Helen Diatile. Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us at this hour. The first question I must ask you is, where are we on the wage negotiations?
Good evening, Bangani, and thank you very much for having us. Very important to first thank the COSATU intervention for them on the 13th to call the minister to intervene on the impulse, and indeed to further appreciate the response of the minister, because we had already knocked doors where we found that it's either the door is open, there's nobody, or there's a door open but there's no proper recipients. So at the moment, negotiations are going to go on, and we have been promised that 0% is off the table. So
0% is off the table. What are you demanding?
We're still demanding 15%.
15%?
Yes. And we still believe that we qualify to get, we worth that 15%, especially considering that when a new CEO is appointed, you find that the CEO will get four times the predecessors. So if that is continuing to happen, it's opening the gap between the poor and the rich, and nobody is intervening to keep this gap at least closer. You have had CEOs getting increases of millions, over $1 million, and it doesn't matter between how long that the other CEO left and the other came in.
Let's come back to the wage negotiations in just a moment, but let's deal with the new allegation that the power utility has been putting on your doorstep. And the question is, are the workers behind the blackouts?
No, not at all. Workers are not behind the blackouts. Eskom said it to the public that they have already set the second intervention. They said South Africans should not worry. Electricity is going to be on as normal, even if the workers are not effectively producing electricity.
That's not what they're saying. There were threats before the load shedding began. Eskom went as far as announcing contingency plans to deal with the crisis because the workers were threatening sabotage.
Not sabotage. I don't think workers will stand and threaten sabotage. They know how dangerous they can be to their employment, so they would not do that.
So what's the reason behind the load shedding?
What is funny is that Eskom has not told us about all this. They're speaking on public. We have not had these allegations. I got these questions on Sunday. I got these questions in the morning. I was at work the whole week. I mean, the whole day today. I've never had anybody saying, this is what is happening.
So how do you explain the reasons behind the load shedding?
The load shedding was communicated earlier, round about the 5th, 6th. Eskom had already noticed other areas. We have a proof of that letter, where the letter was sent to other areas to say there will be load shedding. There was going to be a load shedding anyway, even if there wasn't a match to megawatt.
So it was never in response to threats the workers were making once that 0% freeze was announced?
No, not at all. It's just another way of Eskom blaming to buy public sympathy on their weaknesses in delivering electricity.
All right, now let's talk about the money. You say the workers are worth this 15%. Eskom, we know, is broke. Not only having to pay creditors, but it's also having to borrow to pay for its significantly bloated wage bill. It's not sustainable, is it?
It is not sustainable, but it's bloated somewhere else, not where we are negotiating. Workers are still struggling. They are probably getting, their monthly salary is 1% of the CEO's salary.
Sure, but that points to the fact that the Eskom, the power utility, doesn't have the money. If it has to borrow just to pay salaries, that isn't sustainable.
It cannot borrow while there's still 1 billion sitting at Mackenzie. 8 months ago, Mackenzie said, come and collect your money or we will pay back the money. And Eskom is not making efforts to get that money back. So it certainly says Eskom doesn't have to borrow. They must just get that money and it will pay salaries this year and many other years to come.
Do you think Eskom is flush with cash?
Very much so.
On what basis?
To start with, we had election, my apologies. We had negotiations where we had private security heavily armed. I don't think they will just come there voluntarily. They should have paid. They should have been contracted. And when you contract somebody emergency, you will definitely pay a lot of money because you did not plan and they have to go out of their way to provide your services. So such intervention says to us, there's money to play around. There isn't money to pay workers.
With respect, I mean, obviously as a union, your first priority is to represent your members, and one can appreciate that and respect that. But as we look at the situation that Eskom finds itself in, everyone from government to the ratings agencies have noted with great concern the situation it finds itself in. We now know, of course, that we've got more employees delivering the same amount of power they were delivering more than a decade ago. Not only are your members going to face this wage freeze, or at least a very small percentage, there might indeed be jobs that will have to be shared. Have you taken that into account in terms of your negotiations and your demands?
It is different from somebody who is hearing what Eskom is saying. But if you go to Eskom, you will find that the same amount of workers are also backed up with contractors, labor brokers, employees. So it can be true. It's not over and above the amount that you know of permanent employees. There are other employees doing exactly what the permanent employees are doing.
But the bottom line is that jobs are going to be shared, and many of the members that you think you're protecting are going to be out of work.
It will be, but we will have to be satisfied that it is necessary. Unless then it can just be done out of law. But if it will be done procedurally, we will point out areas where there is a necessary expenditure.
Last question, can you guarantee that, at least as far as your members are concerned, they will not contribute to the lights going out?
Not at all. They will contribute to keep the lights on, not off.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. That was, of course, the National Union of Mine Workers Chief Negotiator, Helen Diatile.